You know when a first-round pick gets cut within 2 full seasons of joining the league and joining the team that drafted him, you know it hasn't gone well. You know it's a big-time bust. But when that pick, that first-round pick, and in this case a top 15 pick, happens to be a quarterback, and you're cutting him before the end of his second season, that is a massive and gigantic bust. And that's exactly what Dwayne Haskins will go down as for the Washington football team. A massive, tragic, wide-scale bust. Think about that. You're talking about coming out of that 2019 draft, Washington fans being hopeful that he could be the young quarterback that this organization really needs. He could be the guy that helps turn the tables. He could be the guy that you could build around for the next 10, 12, 15, maybe years. And he was cut today before the last game of the regular season. And not just that, he was just the team starter on Sunday. And he was cut today for a Washington team that is in a win, and they win the division, and they're in the playoffs, hosting a playoff game in the wild card round, week 17. That situation, and they still said, we don't want the kid that we took in the first round back in 2019. That is a gigantic and seismic bust, if there ever has been one. And it's fascinating to me because, as much as we talk about quarterbacks and how important it is to get that young quarterback and build around them, and how important it is to hit on that quarterback when you take him in round one, and make no mistake about it, it's absolutely critical. And don't bring up the examples of winning with game managers. Like, that crap's of the past. That's passé. That's old NFL days now. In the modern league, you want to be able to draft a young quarterback, develop the young quarterback. You're hoping you get a couple of different windows to really compete. And that first window to really compete for a championship is in years 2 to 4 of said rookie quarterback, because you've got him on that rookie scale contract. Well, now the Redskins are sitting there and they're saying, not only did this not pan out, but now you got to figure out what's going to happen for the long term again. And for all intents and purposes, you're resetting that clock and resetting that window all over again. And for a Washington team, granted, losing record, but hey, in a position where they can make the playoffs, you can say on the one hand, well, they got a chance to make the playoffs, skip-de-skip and whoop-de-woo, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because they don't have a long-term quarterback, so they have nothing. Just like when you try to ask Dwayne Haskins, who does he work for in the NFL right now, he'll say nothing and nobody. And I think this is like a culmination group effort that led up to this, unfortunately. First, you look at the organization. He was drafted by a team that had a lame duck head coach in Jay Gruden. A Jay Gruden who clearly was not a fan of Dwayne Haskins. A Jay Gruden who was not bought into Dwayne Haskins. A Jay Gruden who was not sold on Dwayne Haskins. So when a Dwayne Haskins came in, admittedly to me, even if Haskins had came in and impressed from day one and lit the world on fire, I don't ever think he was fully going to get a true chance under Jay Gruden. And you could say, well, Jay didn't even make it through all of last year. He was eventually sent packing after that really bad start. That's true. But it just planted the seed of you're going to have problems here. An organization that's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, not all the way committed. And frankly, if you talk about the Washington football team, formerly the Redskins, and you talk about, drafting a quarterback with a lot of talent is great. but the infrastructure's got to be there. The support system, the mechanisms all have to be there. And if they're not, how do you expect that young quarterback to succeed? It is. It's a complicated thing because you could say if you have a quarterback like a Deshaun Watson or a Patrick Mahomes or somebody like that, that their talent can triumph over some and overcome a lot. And yes, that's true. But if you look at Deshaun Watson down in Houston, he couldn't overcome the fact that his former head coach and general manager was a blithering fucking idiot who traded away multiple first-round picks for a non-elite left tackle, Laramie Tunsil. You just don't do that! And then turned around and traded away his young franchise quarterbacks, number one option in the passing game, DeAndre Hopkins, and didn't even bother to get a first-round pick in return. Again, ding-dong, dumb dicks, you just don't do that. So, whereas you could say a young quarterback with that it factor, can help elevate those around him and can make a team better, you could certainly make that argument. There is also a support system and a structure and an infrastructure and a mechanism of talent around them that has to be in place for that young quarterback to really, for all intents and purposes, have a chance to succeed. And if you look at Dwayne Haskins, he was put in a really bad situation, frankly. Terry McLaurin is nice, but that's all you got in the passing game. And unless you're pretty hardcore like fantasy football person, or you're a Washington fan, or really, really, truly hardcore NFL fan, name me two other skill players on that Washington offense. I'll wait. Point made, right? So to me, he was set up to failure from the very beginning. And then you have to look at the individual, the player, the man, and you say Dwayne Haskins set himself up for failure. Because he was getting cast aside Cade McNown style. You got 2 years, and they realize that you're a nincompoop, that you're a numbskull, and that they don't want you around this organization anymore. Like, that's a really bad indictment, not so much on the player, but on the person, the professional. And that's really hard for a guy like Dwayne Haskins to overcome. And he has nobody to blame ultimately but himself. And he could sit there and talk about on a Twitter and social media about how he takes full responsibility and how he wasn't the best teammate and the best leader and he's going to learn from it and grow from it. Well, you know what? That's great. And I'm rooting for the young man. He is still a young man, all of 23 years old, something like that. Like, you're talking about a really young man. And think about all of us that are much older than 23. I think about back when I'm 23, and I think about all the really stupid, reckless, irresponsible decisions that I made. Shit, I'm still making them in my 30s. And you're talking about a young man that has the pressure and weight and burden of expectations of having to be the savior of a franchise that is in desperate need of it. He came into the league ill-prepared for it and ill-equipped for it and failed to adjust and failed to come in and do those necessary things to show that he could be the guy long-term, that he could be trusted, that he could be relied upon, that he could be counted upon. Like, when you're violating COVID protocols to go to the strip club, like, you really start to wonder if this guy really wants it or not. And he has talent, but you would never see it really manifest on the field. You saw no progression in him from year 2 to year 1, and in fact, you saw some regression. And in the large part, I think you could directly attribute that to he did not take the game seriously. And it can be tough from the outside looking in sometimes to say, like, how hard does somebody truly work? Like, it's really tough to question somebody's passion and desire for the game and commitment to the game if you're not in that study room, if you're not in those film sessions, if you're not in the locker room. Sometimes yes, but sometimes no. It's glaringly, blatantly obvious when a guy doesn't bring the necessary required dedication, commitment, and work ethic to his profession. And you see it with a Dwayne Haskins. I mean, he was terrible this year. And early on in the year, I thought it was kind of clown show stuff for Ron Rivera to bench him. And in some ways, maybe I still do. But on the other hand, you know what? At the end of the day, if Haskins wasn't taking the job seriously, and you couldn't trust him and the team couldn't trust him, then you did the right thing by benching him, period. Unbelievable, man. Like, I'm not surprised that he got cut. I totally saw this coming at the end of the season. And they didn't even wait until the end of the year. They said, we don't even want you in the frickin' facility before week 17. They're probably afraid he's going to go out and do something else stupid, violate COVID protocols or something, and put other people at risk. It's a tough day for the Washington football team. It's a tough day for the fans. Because on the one hand, you should be feeling excited about the potential, with the losing record and all. So it doesn't really mean much, but still, potential of being able to win the division, make the playoffs, get a home playoff game under head coach Ron Rivera's first season at the helm. You're talking about a team where you just took a quarterback in the first round last year. Like, this should be a time for incredible optimism. It should be a time for excitement. And instead, it feels like a lot of conflicted feelings and a lot of, we're back to square one again. I hope Dwayne Haskins takes this seriously. Like, this literally, you have put your professional life at stake. And if you want this and you really, really, really want to be what you've pursued your whole life setting yourself up to be, like, you have to go out there and prove it. I'm assuming at some point somebody will give him another chance. I think a place like Pittsburgh, under a guy like Mike Tomlin, who has a great culture, is very much a culture guy in terms of being able to work with different types of personalities and so forth. Like, I think Dwayne Haskins could go play under somebody like a Mike Tomlin, potentially learn from a Big Ben, assuming how much longer Big Ben's even going to be there. Like, bottom line is it's worth the gamble at that point. The talent was there at one point to be a first-round pick. And if he ever figures it out, like, Pittsburgh might sit there and have themselves something. Or some other teams could potentially as well. But man, if you're a Washington fan right now, like, how you feeling about this? I can't imagine you feel very good. Probably not as bad as Dwayne Haskins feels right now. And not as bad as that Washington organization as a whole feels right now, because the first round pick they just spent on quarterback last year is already flamed out on them. But tell me, seriously, how bad you feel about this? Because it can't be good.